Are you ready to revolutionize your relationship with money? Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Pearson Ravitz' story begins with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a passionate OB-GYN at the height of her career. But then, a shoulder injury struck during a precipitous delivery. Her dreams were shattered, leaving her unable to practice medicine. Determined to make a difference, Stephanie became an advocate for her peers, guiding them through the complex disability process. Alongside insurance expert Scott Ravitz, Stephanie founded Pearson Ravitz, a company determined to approach insurance differently. Together, they set their mission to educate and empower physicians to protect their most valuable asset, their income, and the most important people in their life, their family. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand the unique concerns of physicians. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness or injury could leave you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But with a little planning and guidance, you can prepare for every possibility. Visit PearsonRavitz.com to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor. Welcome back to another episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician, where we dive deep into the strategies that help you build wealth while leading a balanced life. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath. And today, we're thrilled to welcome back a very special guest, Dr. Tarang Patel. As a seasoned expert in doctor finance, Dr. Patel combines his medical expertise with a sharp acumen for investment and financial management. Beyond his clinical practice, he's an avid blogger, podcaster, and a trusted advisor to his peers seeking financial independence. Dr. Patel's approachable style and deep knowledge base make him a favorite among physicians looking to navigate the complex world of finance. Some of you may remember, Dr. Patel and I collaborated some years ago on a show where we discussed the latest healthcare news and topics in the world of physician finance. So strap in as we unpack some hot topics, including the surprising shutdown of Walmart Healthcare, the FTC's latest moves on non-compete clauses, and how multifamily syndicators are eyeing your investment dollars. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Patel.
Oh, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be back.
It's very nice to have you on, Tarang. What have you been up to recently?
Working really hard. I think like everyone, our practice is busy. I don't know if you're aware of the national radiologist shortage, but every radiologist that's still working is working like doubly hard. I've just been extremely busy with that.
I was not aware of that. Are radiologists dropping out because of the pandemic? What's happening?
I mean, I think the pandemic had an impact on a lot of fields. So I think radiologists was not as affected by that. But I think just in general, the age range of radiologists has increased. People are retiring and the sheer demand for radiology services has gone up and the complexity of studies has gone up. So I've just noticed in the last 5 years, the number of cross-sectional like CTs, MRIs that we do have gone up so much. And then the complexity of each case has gone up. So I think people who are at the cusp of retiring were like, okay, this is too much. Some of them have retired. Some of them had private equity buyouts that have finally taken hold and they've put in their time. And now they're like, all right, I've cashed out. I'm done. It's probably a combination of a lot of factors, but it's pretty acute right now. So it's good to be in demand, but at the same time, it's the ones who are working are really working pretty hard.
Well, thank you for what you do. We all appreciate our radiologists, especially as a primary care doc. Your insight is invaluable. So thank you for what you do. So let's go ahead and dive into the latest news. We are first going to talk about Walmart. On April 30th, 2024, Walmart, the largest retailer in the United States, announced it will close 51 of its healthcare centers in 6 states and end virtual healthcare services. Walmart has recently made a big push into healthcare, opening clinics next to its superstores that offered primary and urgent care, labs, x-rays, behavioral health, and dental work in states like Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, and Texas. So Walmart basically believed it could use its massive financial scale and store base to offer convenient, low-cost services to patients in rural and underserved areas that lacked primary care resources. Walmart often likes to state that 90% of the US population is located within 10 miles of a Walmart. So they certainly had the scale game. So, Tarang, how do you feel about Walmart shutting down all of its stores?
I think it's just the latest example that healthcare is not easy. And you have so many different entities that have kind of ridiculed or made fun of like physicians and hospitals and then said, we can do it better, and then have come in and tried and seen that it's not really as straightforward as traditional retail or software or whatever. It's just an example that healthcare is a different entity with different regulations, different reimbursements, and the relationship between physician and patient can't come down to pure transactional value that they can find on a spreadsheet. I was surprised to hear Walmart shutting down versus I think Walgreens had a big amount that shut down, and some of the other pharmacy companies that had it. Walmart, as you said, is the largest retailer. They have the scale to do this. And to see them shut down, it was eye-opening to pretty much everyone outside of healthcare. Because it's not just about money. That's the thing that they don't understand. There is a relationship between physicians and their patients, and you can't just make it by substituting lowest cost providers and things like that to solve this problem. That said, I think this will wake up the government too, to maybe it's time to increase reimbursements, maybe it's time to decrease regulations for physicians to open their own competition, because right now it ends up being hospitals and massive healthcare insurance companies that have these clinics. And I think the more physician independent practices that we can get into the industry, the better everyone will be.
Yeah, and we'll go into that in a second because the government is taking action, and that's nice to see. It's interesting to me, running this business and a few others that I own, it's so much easier to run really any other business than healthcare. And a lot of the times when people look at healthcare from the outside, they think, well, you're charging us so much. Like, look at these doctor bills that we get. I go to the primary care doctor and I get a $300 bill. You guys must be making out well. And I'm sure from the outside, it seems like it could be very profitable, but they don't know how many fingers are in the pot, what gets billed versus what gets reimbursed, collections, all this stuff that you need to do to make a business profitable. It's very, very complicated. Even doctors that are very good at minute details have sometimes a hard time figuring out how exactly their patients are being billed. What are they being billed? In fact, we're kept in the dark on purpose a lot of times. But it's interesting to me what the Walmart spokesperson, Marilee McInnes, reported. She said, healthcare is expensive to run. We're finding that the increased labor and operating cost environment with reimbursement, both public and private, make it difficult to run the business and obvious that we had to close. They basically face the same problems that we face as physicians trying to go through insurance, spending half of our business's labor dealing with the insurance company, dealing with the prior auths, dealing with getting them to reimburse us, Having the third party in this relationship between doctor and patient, that is insurance, it's so detrimental to the healthcare business and also just the doctor-patient relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in no other industry is such a involved entity as the insurance company so immune to lawsuits, so immune to any regulation. You've seen just this week, there was a ProPublica article about a physician who did prior authorization approvals or care management for the insurance company. And she basically said that she was pressured to make decisions so quickly that there's no way she could review a case, whether it was something that was medically indicated or not. So basically, it was like she was expected to deny and then maybe look at it very briefly and then say, no, yes. And there's no repercussion for the insurance company. There's no repercussion for that physician. Whereas if you took care of that patient, you may not get paid, but you're certainly liable for anything that happens.
That explains so much because as a PCP, I will write my note, justify whatever according to what we would consider regular medical lingo, and it just get denied. And then I would call and be like, hey, let's look at my note together. Look at this physical exam where I said she had a supraclavicular lymph node and really needs a CT. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's approved. Are you ready to write down the approval number? I mean, it usually took just one phone call, kind of a pain in my butt because I'm seeing patients all day and then I have to make time at the end of my day and stay after clinic to get on the phone with this insurance company. Takes 20 minutes to get my staff to call them, stay on hold, and then they connect me to the provider whenever they come on. And then I get on there for 2 minutes. It's done. We have the approval, but still 30-minute waste of time.
Yeah. And how many times a day do you face that? So you multiply that times all the physicians who are ordering exams or ordering care for their patients, and it's a designed part of their business model. They will not admit that, but it is 100% a part of their business model.
Criminal, really. Well, what does this mean for healthcare access?
I think the people who maybe relied for low-cost care at Walmart are going to have to kind of scramble and see where they can get it. It may mean a little bit more gets shifted to urgent cares, ERs, to other already strained primary care offices. It just overall probably means decreasing access. You're probably aware that nationally there's a huge backlog of appointments available to primary care. Even in now what we consider highly accessible metro areas. I was just reading someone who works at Mass General, a physician at Mass General tweeted out a while ago saying that she couldn't get an appointment with a primary care office. Boston is probably the most medically saturated city in the country, and she couldn't get an appointment with a primary care provider. If that's the case in Boston, you can imagine what it's going to be like in rural Arkansas.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a shortage of up to 55,000 primary care physicians expected in the next decade. 55,000 physicians. Like that's the entire country, it seems, right?
Seriously.
That's a lot. And even me being a primary care physician, I had the hardest time getting a primary care physician to see me after my ER visit recently, and I had to, go through personal contacts and ask one of my friends to get me in. And she did, thankfully. But going through the front desk and through the regular pathway, impossible to get appropriate follow-up. Corporate healthcare, you mentioned, in general, there are other entities at play here. Walgreens is planning to close 160 of its Village MD primary care clinics, and Amazon in February said it would cut a few hundred jobs across its healthcare units, including the clinic operator One Medical, which it acquired for $3.5 billion last year. So it seems like all these corporate entities are finding it hard to be in healthcare.
I don't know if you remember, it was big hubbub a few years ago where Amazon, JP Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway kind of came together, and they were going to come up with a employer-based model. It was called Haven Healthcare, and I think they had one of the famous physician authors, if I'm not mistaken, it might be Atul Gawande, one of the famous physician people out of Boston, to head that. And it was supposed to be revolutionary, and within a year and a half, they closed down. So it's actually depressing to think a little bit, because if some of these companies with the massive resources are unable to solve, makes it very difficult for the individual practitioner to be like, well, what am I supposed to do? And it seems to accelerate that trend of them selling their practices, if they have them, to the health systems or other corporate entities, and just be like, all right, I'll be another employee.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the insurance piece. You've seen an upcropping of recent direct primary care practices where they're just bypassing insurance altogether and just saying, okay, we're not going to take insurance. We can't take Medicare. We have to opt out because we're not going to be doing insurance at all. That's it. And then you pay me $100 a month and I'll be your PCP and be available for you when you need me. When you're sick, I'll be there. That's an interesting concept. What do you think about that, Tarang?
Huge fan. I'm a huge fan of that. That was early on in my podcast. I explored that, and that was, 6 years ago. And it's only grown since then significantly. I mean, if you think about what $50 or $100 a month, it's not small, but people pay more than that for cell phone bills. I think that is a reasonable expense to look at. It is now, I believe, HSA. You can use it as part of your HSA funds as well.
I think it's currently being advocated for.
Yeah, and I think they should absolutely pass that. I mean, a lot of states allow you to use your 529, plans to pay for some private schools. So I think if that's the case, then the same thing should apply for HSA and DPC type practices. But regardless, whether it is or not, I still think it's a good model. And it, unfortunately, though, does exacerbate the shortage of primary care for patients who can't afford it. But to be fair, I think they're having a difficult time no matter what. I don't think this is going to really change it that much one way or the other. I do think that the physicians who are going to this model seem to have a much more sustainable career path ahead of them. And the one thing that I will say is if wealth managers can do this, whether it's a fixed cost or a percentage of assets, my gosh, for your health, way more important than for your wealth.
Yeah, I agree. Once the government allows HSA funds to be used for direct primary care billing or, just the subscription payments, I think that's going to open the floodgate towards DPC for PCPs. But right now, when you're talking, I want you to pay me out of pocket and you're not going to be able to use your HSA or FSA money, it's not going to be tax subsidized at all. That's kind of a harder sell. Certainly people are willing to pay, but it's a harder sell to the general public at the moment because you still need to maintain your insurance coverage for when you need to go see a specialist or go, get specialized labs.
I think most people now are kind of in that mindset, though, that they don't really use their insurance as much for primary care. They're going to have to keep it no matter what for the time being.
I mean, you go to your doctor 3 times, 4 times out of the year, and you've made your DPC payment. I mean, especially with the high deductible plans, the first couple of visits are not covered at all, and it's all coming to your deductible anyway. Well, let's move on to the FTC. Great news for doctors recently. The FTC has recently moved to ban non-compete agreements. The final rule bans new non-competes with all workers, including senior executives, after the effective date, which is currently thought to be September 4th, 2024. The final rule becomes effective 120 days after being published in the Federal Register, and it hasn't been published yet. But September 4th is the projected date for that to happen. Specifically, the final rule provides that it is an unfair method of competition and therefore a violation of Section 5 of FTC Act for employers to enter into non-competes with workers after the effective date. So they're going to make it illegal to have a non-compete in your contract. For existing non-competes, the final rule adopts a different approach for senior executives than for other workers. For senior executives, existing non-competes can remain in force. Existing non-competes with workers other than senior executives are not enforceable after the effective date of the final rule. And fewer than 1% of workers are estimated to be senior executives. They're basically people that are earning more than $151,164 annually who are in a policy-making position. So you would have to be a doctor in administration. This is interesting. First of all, what does this change for you, Tarang?
For me, directly, nothing significantly right now, but I think for the medical field in general, I think it's a good outcome. We'll see. I think there's already legal challenges, so these things take a while to get settled. But the trend, no matter what, is to move away from non-competes anyway, and many states are not enforcing non-competes, even though they're on the books. Some states do, so it's variable state to state. This will be a more federal thing, so that's good. I think anything that improves competition. I mean, quite honestly, a lot of places have these incomprehensible non-competes for physicians that are, 10 miles or 20 miles from their practice and then any other affiliated practice. So you may practice 10 miles away from the primary place you are, but if they're affiliated with another place that's 5 miles, then all of a sudden that resets closer to you. So I think that some of these things were just completely done in favor of the employers, and physicians and workers in general were just too scared. And I think this kind of starts leveling the playing field. Does it change everything completely? No, but it's a very good step.
I have personally left the town that I work in, left thousands of patients that I love, cried tears with them as I had to leave them because of my non-compete. And I couldn't practice in the area. And yes, they were under question. Yes, I could have legally challenged it, but honestly, I didn't want to spend the money or the effort on a lawyer to fight that. I just decided to go, just a little bit out of town, too far away for most people to drive, and, kind of a lifestyle factor for me to drive 40 minutes into Vermont to go practice. But yeah, it has affected my life so significantly. I feel very, very heartened by this proposition, even if the FTC is eventually, ruled to not have jurisdiction over these matters. I think that's what the court cases are going to argue, that the FTC is kind of going beyond its usual capacity to do this. But even then, I think there's enough question brought to non-competes for me to be like, I'm never signing a non-compete again. I'm just not going to sign a contract that has it in it. And, that's what I did for my current contract. And the hospital I work for was like, absolutely no non-competes. They're going out of our contracts. And they were very understanding. So I think in general, healthcare is going to be acknowledging, and doctors are going to be more mindful of the fact that these non-competes are really pretty unfair, not just the doctors, but also their patients. I wanted to read a couple of comments that were sent in that the FTC included in their report. Here's a few other doctors that commented, and the FTC took that really seriously. Here's one. I'm a physician in a rural, underserved area of Appalachia. Non-compete clauses have become ubiquitous in the healthcare industry. With hospital systems merging, providers with aggressive non-compete clauses must abandon the community that they serve if they choose to leave their employer. Healthcare providers feel trapped in their current employment situation, leading to a significant burnout that can shorten their career longevity. Many are forced to retire early or take a prolonged pause in their career when they have no other recourse to combat their employer. Here's another one. I was terminated by a large hospital organization suddenly with a thriving full pediatric practice. My lawyer and I believe the non-compete does not apply in my circumstance and that the non-compete is overly broad, restrictive, and harmful to the public, my patients. I started seeing my patients most gratuitously in their home so that they would not go without the care they wanted and needed. The judge awarded the order, and I was told that I cannot talk to patients on the phone, text patients, Zoom visits, or provide any pediatric care within my non-compete area. Patients are angry and panicked. I'm worried every day about my patients and how I can continue to care for them. Patients have a right to choose and keep their doctor. The trust built between a patient and his doctor is crucial to keeping a patient healthy. It's not a relationship that can or should be replaced. Patients should always come first, and that is not happening. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, no, I think there's countless other examples of this where large corporate practices, health systems have used their resources, and they massively are in a much better financial position than individual physicians or even small physician practices within that entity. And they know this. And that's why they kept pushing the envelope on this, because there was really no reason for that. But they did it. They did it because they were in a massive, asymmetrically powerful position, and they just pushed it. So I think finally, this is going the other way. And I wanted to acknowledge one physician in particular, Dr. Mitch Lee. He runs this group called Take Back Medicine, and he has been extremely influential in talking directly to the FTC and his members of his group in order to push this thing forward. So I just really appreciate Mitch. I've talked to him a number of times, and him and some of the other key members in his group have done an amazing job.
Wow, really humongous service to physicians. A lot of the times physicians don't have time to advocate, to our decision makers, to our lawmakers. And this just proves how important advocacy is to get the rules passed that will keep us being able to do our jobs. One last thing about this FTC ruling. What about non-for-profit hospitals? Are they included in this?
So here's a question for you. Do you know any health system that's not profit?
I have worked for technically 501c3s technically, but yeah, they certainly act like for-profit hospitals when they're training us how to bill and code.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, there's a few county hospitals, some government facilities, those are truly nonprofits. There are some massive health systems, and each metro area has one or two at least that are behemoths. And by any scale and any business metrics, they are truly profit agencies, but they are nonprofits, much like institutions of higher education with their $50 billion endowments and using up leverage to buy real estate around their campuses. These health systems are doing similar things, buying up practices or pushing out competitive practices, buying up urgent cares, buying up imaging centers, buying up labs, all those things, and then using their nonprofit/hospital status to increase billing at those facilities that were previously independent practices. There's been a number of stories about physicians who've sold their practices who still practice exactly in that same facility, but are now owned by a health system where their patient, let's say it was a cardiology practice, they came in a year before, got an EKG, may have been 80 or $100. All of a sudden it's $800 because that's what a health system can charge now because their facility fee. Physicians, independent practitioners cannot compete with that. It's not like their hospital has directly put a hospital into that office. No, it's the same office, but now it's under the guise of a hospital or a health system. So there's no nonprofit anymore. Executives of these systems are making tens of millions of dollars a year, and multiple vice presidents who are non-physicians and some who are physicians are making millions of dollars without seeing any patients. So yeah, there's no profit because you keep building facilities, you keep buying facilities, and you keep paying your executives this month.
Now let's turn to investments. A recent article in The Real Deal highlighted how multifamily syndicators are targeting physicians. A couple of the people we know personally were named directly in this article. Could you break down why doctors are seen as prime targets and what they should be watching out for?
Yeah, this is one that I've been talking about for the last 3 years. And I think the media is now catching up to me on this.
You're a trendsetter.
Yeah. You and I, we met in person 4 or 5 years ago at FinCon, which was a conference for bloggers, and a bunch of financial physician influencers were there. And other than you and a few other people that I met, I just didn't get a good vibe from the majority of the physicians, and not just the physicians, but other people there. It was designed to market, your blog, your podcast, whatever, which is fine. I'm not opposed to people making money. But I felt like physicians who do generally pretty well from their clinical work, side investments, were there to learn how to market towards other physicians. And I thought that they looked at physicians as their product, not as their colleagues that they're trying to educate. They come up and make it seem like they're educating people. And this is going to be controversial because I know you're much nicer online than I am. People know that that's how I feel. But I think that when people were teaching physicians and making some small side income, that was one thing. When they were genuinely educating physicians via courses, that's also okay, even though I'm not a fan of all those courses. But then when they kind of mixed the two entities and were charging insane amounts for courses, conferences, retreats, and on top of it, pitching their own investments in those kind of things, either you're a teacher or you're an investor. Usually the people who do best at investing, you don't see Warren Buffett teaching a conference on how to invest. Now, he has a meeting this week in Omaha that you can attend if you're a shareholder, but he's not asking you to pay thousands of dollars for that. Sam Zell, who's one of the great real estate investors of our time, he passed away recently, didn't have a course on how to become a real estate investor. He was a real estate investor. The thing that physicians, I think we do, and we're susceptible to this just like everyone else, is that we place trust in those people who are similar to us. And so we use our online community of physicians. We gain their trust by teaching them things. And then we say, oh, by the way, I'm doing this investment. And that's okay to a degree, but they don't act the way a fiduciary. And the term fiduciary is important because they're supposed to look out for your interests before their own. You never see the term fiduciary in real estate investments. I have never seen that term. And the problem with the real estate specifically is that during the pandemic, people were very much trying to figure out side gigs and try passive income and things like that. And a few people figured out that, my community, quote unquote, of physicians, physician communities in general, could be easily exploitable for fast funding of these investments. And it wasn't just the people listed in these articles, but there are multiple of these people. And I've already seen at least 6 different physician-led syndications fail, in terms of, people reaching out to me and saying their investments were kind of not panning out. And most of those people who reached out to me said, I just kind of trusted these people. And I'm like, A, that's your fault for trusting people without doing the proper due diligence. But B, I don't think that people should try to take advantage of that trust. Earning someone's trust, it's like physician-patient relationship. It's a very holy thing that we hold. And, the teacher-student relationship, especially, Indian culture, that it's a very special relationship. And I feel like not everyone has that, and they take advantage of it. Now, again, it's a lesson learned. We've all made financial mistakes. The reason I kept harping on this was I really did not like the way people were taking advantage. and then selling their expertise to these people on these courses while their deals were going bad. And I'm like, you can't tell me you're an expert if you invested in these things. So, a lot of misrepresentation, a lot of trustworthiness, and I think a lot of lessons learned for physicians.
Do you think all syndications are bad investments?
No, I actually don't. And to be honest, syndications now are a little bit better than they were in 2021, 2022. Doesn't mean they're great yet, and I'm not jumping into them, but they're better now because you're getting better deals. But in 21, 22, I think they were 90% bad because the experienced real estate people were the ones selling, and the inexperienced, many physician-led ones were buying. That's why I knew then, I was like, who is paying 3 times the amount that someone paid 5 years ago for an apartment building in downtown Phoenix that's run down? It hasn't appreciated that much. Rents did go up during the pandemic, but that was not sustainable. And we've seen a 20% drop in rents now. I was like, people buying them were only looking to flip these things and turn it around in a few years. They really weren't looking for the long term. They were looking at acquisition fees, management fees, refinance fees. There's a lot of fees that they were looking at. They were not looking, in my opinion, in the best interests of their investors.
Yeah, and this article mentions that the people mentioned weren't actually the GPs of these syndications. They were feeding into other syndications that they didn't actually manage and just charging a referral fee, basically. Is that what you understand?
Some of the ones that I saw were like that. There's one specific one that I can think of that was done here in Phoenix that they pitched to a bunch of physicians and a bunch of dentists in these various Facebook groups. It seemed like they were the GPs. Now, I'm sure it was written somewhere that it wasn't exactly that way. If you went through the paperwork with a fine-tooth comb, you might have been able to figure that out. But it's made it certainly seem to most people like they were. Now, whether they did it or not, that to me it was not a good deal. But that was another set of fees that probably that you didn't know about as an investor, or you didn't assume that was being, taken away from you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go into syndications thinking this is going to be an easy way to invest in real estate. And, I don't really want to get my hands dirty unclogging a toilet in the middle of the night. That's always what people say about direct real estate ownership. And unfortunately, that doesn't excuse you from doing your due diligence and really learning about what a syndication is. Are there any good books you would recommend that, good resources people could go to learn about actually how to evaluate a syndication and determine if the fees are reasonable or not?
There's a pretty dense book by, I think, Brian Burke. It's called The Hands-Off Investor. It's one that I think most people have recommended. There was an older one that was, a little bit less dense, but it's also pretty good. But quite honestly, yeah, I mean, if you're willing to drop $4,000 on a Learn How to Be a Passive Investor course, why wouldn't you just spend $20 on a book? And I get it, you might want the structure and things like that. The majority of the people running those courses also are running syndications, and you're somehow getting trust into them. And then you're like, well, I have this deal. That's the part that, I'm like, just buy the book. There's no additional work that you have to do in terms of using those people to invest with. But if you're dropping $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 into a deal, can you not afford to take a day and read this? I guarantee if they would have read that book, most of them probably wouldn't have invested in these deals.
I think that just hammers home the point that you should never invest in something you don't understand. Please don't just go off of trust in someone else. I mean, you never should be doing that. Learn about an investment, make sure you understand you're investing in, and then invest in it appropriately based on your goals, and hopefully after getting the advice of an independent fiduciary advisor that will help you if you need that help. Personally, I think it's tough in the financial education space. As you know, I tend to be very selective about the people I let advertise with me. Of course, every investment has its heyday. Syndications aren't doing well right now because of the recent changes in prices and a lot of the variable interest rates being due or about to be refinanced and so on and so forth. But as a whole, like you said, it's not a terrible investment strategy if you can understand what you're investing in, if you can adequately diversify your portfolio and make sure you understand the fees, make sure you understand what you're investing in and if it aligns with your goals. It doesn't with mine right now, but maybe in the future it might. I don't know.
I think when everyone's talking about it, and that's what was happening in 2021, 2022, everyone was talking about it. And when that right there should be a red flag to you. Be like, okay, if everyone's talking about it, the price discovery is you're not getting a deal. You may be getting an okay individual thing, but you're not getting a deal. And honestly, that's a lot of investing is, like I said, now is a better time because you're able to get some discounts because the existing operators are in some distress. So it's a better time now. It's not a perfect time by any stretch, but it's a better time now. And I think that this is when people are more scared of it. If anything, it should be piquing your interest a little bit more now. You will vet the operators a little bit more and understand that you have more control as the individual investor now than you did in 2021. That's the bottom line, is kind of be out of the cycle and you'll generally do better.
Yeah, don't go with the crowd when it comes to investing, for sure. The only exception I can think of is, index funds. They tend to keep getting popular and more popular, and they still, in my opinion, are great investments. But again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future will bring. But for right now, I'm still very happy with my lazy 3-fund portfolio strategy.
You don't have to unclog any toilets with that.
I still do my share of unclogging.
Well, that was the lazy fund portfolio. Yeah, that's a different story.
I meant I have real estate too. Wow, that came out terrible. Anyway, let's move on. Now we have a fun segment we like to call Cash or Crash. I'm going to throw out a few financial trends for you, and you tell us if you'd invest in them or not. Cash in, or if they're overhyped and likely to tank, crash out. Ready? Cryptocurrency in 2024.
So cryptocurrency for me was a hard no in 2021. In 2024, I would say most cryptocurrency, still a hard no. With Bitcoin, I've been wrong for a little bit in terms of the price. I still don't know what Bitcoin does, but it stayed up longer than I thought. So it's not as hard of a no for me. To be fully transparent, I have bought a little bit via a closed-end fund just to mess around. It was selling at a discount last year before this recent run-up. So I've actually made some money on it, but do I recommend it? No. But do I think it's a hard crash? Also, probably no. Well, Bitcoin specifically. The other ones, I don't have any involvement in the other ones.
Let's specify oil mineral rights.
Okay, so oil 2 years ago was a fantastic deal. I did buy some Exxon in the $40 price range when oil briefly went negative. I don't know if you remember that a few years ago, but there was a crash with too much supply and they were actually paying people technically to take the oil barrels. It didn't exactly happen that way, but oil briefly hit negative and it was in the $20 range or something like that. So that's when I bought it. Now it's at 80, 90, and people are seemingly going away from EVs again. There's a trend nationally of people not buying EVs and they're sitting on the lots, and Tesla's trying to reduce prices and things. So again, me being the counter opportunity person, I would think that right now, if you're in the market to buy a car, buy an EV. They're dirt cheap relatively, but oil and all those things are at a much higher price. Will it go up? Yeah, it probably will go up, but I don't think it's going to go up to the same degree that it did the last few years.
Telehealth startups or AI startups?
AI overall, I think, is overhyped. Not because I don't think we're going to use it. I certainly think we're going to use it. But I think we're in that process right now of anyone could get funded if they throw AI in the name. Just like a few years ago, if they were able to throw crypto in the name, and a few years before that, .com. So yes, that will crash. Individual companies may succeed. Generally, I think that there's going to be a lot more failures than there are going to be success stories, and you have to be very selective with who you're investing in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the wild, wild west right now. It's going to even out here shortly. Seems like the big names are getting into it now, which is good. And maybe we'll get a little bit more stability. All right, Tarang, this has been super fun. Thank you so much for coming on and discussing these really interesting topics in healthcare news.
Thank you. Well, appreciate you having me on. I'm glad to see how well you're doing with the podcast and always ready to discuss controversial topics. I feel like I'm one of the few that'll do it.
I love that. Yeah. And you don't shy away from hurting people's feelings, which I think everyone appreciates, because we do need some truth tellers, some people that are raising the red flag when things look shady and people are being taken advantage of. So thank you for doing that for our community.
I will just say one thing. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to do that. But at the same time, I think that physicians who have gained a level of trust from the community of other physicians have a special responsibility to be a little bit more transparent and not worry so much about their business, because we generally do well. as physicians. The thing that I don't like is that the majority of them have transitioned away from being physicians and now are fully in the content sales business. But they're playing off that trust as physicians. I should say content sales, real estate, whatever. And so they are much more likely to censor dissenting opinions. And that I don't like. I am free to admit when I'm wrong on a forum. And I've been wrong, as I said, about Bitcoin and things like that. So that's okay. I didn't make money from that. So I'm free to allow dissenting opinions. And I like that you do too.
I appreciate it if someone tells me they think I'm selling out or they think I'm veering away from my mission, because sometimes it's tough to pick the right advertiser, pick the right content to be on the show. And, there's a line between learning about something, teaching about something, and then telling people to invest in something and not acting in their best interest. I think in this podcast, I like to create a space that is open to new ideas, open to learning about the different investment opportunities, different lifestyle choices. But I try not to force people to pick an investment or say this is the best one. In the process of vetting advertisers, I try to pick the people that I think will not screw over my audience. Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but I try to do my due diligence to make sure the people we allow on here are not going to screw you over. They have a good product. They have an option for an investment that you might like, that might fit your needs, but I'm not going to say does or not.
It's a business, and I think so far you've done a very good job with that. And believe me, if you veer, I'll let you know.
Thank you. And that's why I keep you around. Dr. Patel, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have an awesome day. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in and getting your finance fix with us today. If you had as much fun as we did, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more episodes where money meets medicine in ways you never imagined. Swing by our socials to say hi, share your thoughts, or drop a question you'd like us to explore next time. Keep smiling all the way to the bank, and remember, managing money shouldn't be a chore. Catch you next time on Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. Stay frugal, y'all. Now, a final word from our sponsor. At Pearson Rabbits, they understand that life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness, injury, or catastrophic event could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Rabbits builds human connections before they create quotes. Visit www.pearsonrabbits.com today and embark on your journey to safeguarding your future.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.